Hello again. In this video, I'm going to go over this homework problem from section 5.1. So let me read through the problem and I'll show you how to work it out. So it says 5 males with an X-linked genetic disorder have 1 child each. The random variable X is the number of children among the 5 who inherit the X-linked genetic disorder. Determine whether the probability distribution is given. If a probability distribution is given, find its mean and standard deviation. If a probability distribution is not given, identify the requirements that are not satisfied. So first of all, the random variable X in this case is equal to the number of children among the 5 who inherit the X-linked genetic disorder. So what could X be equal to? Well, the only possible values of X would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, because X represents the number of children. And there are 5 children that are possible. So it has to be one of these numbers, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then this table lists the associated probability for each of these possible outcomes for the random variable. And what we're supposed to determine is whether this displays a probability distribution. Now there's 2 things you need to have a probability distribution. The first one is the probability for each possible outcome needs to be between 0 and 1 inclusive. So if you check each of these probabilities here listed for each of the possible outcomes for the random variable, each of these probabilities are between 0 and 1 inclusive. So the first condition is satisfied. The second condition is the probabilities when you add them up for all the possible outcomes of the random variable must add up to 1. So let's add up all of these probabilities and see if they add up to 1. Okay, so you have 0.025 plus 0.148 plus 0.327 plus another 0.327 plus another 0.148 and then another 0.025. So if you add up those probabilities, you can see that you do get 1. Okay, so both conditions are satisfied. Okay, so we do have a probability distribution here. Okay, so now that we know we have a probability distribution, we're supposed to find its mean and its standard deviation. Okay, so to find the mean of a probability distribution is given by this formula here. It's the sum of x times p, where you sum over all the possible x values. Okay, so I've kind of listed this in the table over here. These are the x values that are possible, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and these are their associated probabilities. And so what this says is we have to take each of these x values and multiply it by its corresponding probability. So in other words, we have to take 0 times this probability, which gives us 0. And I'm listing that in this column here. All right, then you have to take 1 times its probability, and you get this number here. And then 2 times its probability gives you this number. 3 times its probability gives you this one. 4 times its probability gives you this number. And then 5 times its probability gives you this number. Okay, so I've listed x times p for each x value and its corresponding probability in this column. And then we have to add up those numbers. And once we add up those numbers, that gives us the mean of the probability distribution, which we denote with this symbol mu. Now you can also do this on the calculator, so let me show you how you can do this. If you go to the Stat button and then go to Edit, you can type in L1, column L1, the x values, which I've done here, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then in L2, I listed their associated probabilities. right, which is this column here. And so I just type those into L2. And then what you want to do is, after you've done that, go to another column that's open. So I'm going to go to L4. And then scroll up to the top so you can see the cursor is at L4. And you can see down here it says L4 is equal to something. Well, what we want this column to have in it is x times p, which would be, this is the column for x, and this is the column for p. So we're going to take L1 and multiply it by L2. That's x times p. Okay, so the way we're going to do this is you need, L1 is a blue button, so you need to press this second blue button, and then you get L1 right there. And then L2 is right here. It's also a blue button, so you got to press this second button. Before you do that, you have to say times, and then times L2. And then once you've done that, press enter, and then that'll appear in the column for L4. And you can see that these are the same numbers I have here. So that's a quick way of coming up with these numbers in this column, x times p. Okay, now let's go ahead and add these numbers up. Now I'm going to turn off the calculator just to get out of this table. So to turn off the calculator, you go to this blue off button. Okay, and so now we're just going to add up these numbers here. So 0.148 plus 0.654 plus 9.981 plus 0.592 plus 0.125. And you can see we get 2.5. So that is the mean of this probability distribution. Okay, again, we're using this formula here. So we just took x times p for each x value, and we listed them in this column. And then this means we add them up. We sum them up. And when we sum them up, we get 2.5. Okay, so that's our mean for this probability distribution. Okay, the next thing we're going to find is the standard deviation for the probability distribution. So the standard deviation is the square root of the sum of x squared times p minus mu squared. Okay, so in this formula, what we have to do is we have to sum up, that's what this sigma symbol means, we have to sum up the values of x squared times p for each x value. And then when we're done doing that, we have to subtract off the mean squared, which we already found, right? That's 2.5. And then whatever that number is, we take the square root of it, and that will be the standard deviation for the probability distribution. And we denote the standard deviation by this symbol sigma. Okay, so an easy way to do this is take your x values, which are in this column here, and we want to square them. So 0 squared is 0, 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, and 5 squared is 25. And so I'm going to put them in this column here, the x squared column. And then now what we have to do is we have to take each of these x squared values and multiply them by their corresponding probabilities, which are listed in this column. And so we take this number here, x squared, and we multiply it by its probability here, and of course we get 0. And I'm going to list those in this column here, right? X squared times p. Okay, so the next one would be 1 times its associated probability, and that gives you 0.148. All right, so then the next one will be 4 times its probability, and that gives you this number. 9 times its probability gives you this number. 16 times its probability gives you this number, and then 25 times its probability gives you that number. Okay, and then we have to add up each of these numbers. and that will give us this summation here. Now again, you can do this on the calculator, so let me show you how to do that. So again, you want to go to the Stat button and then Edit. And what I've done here is I created in the column L3, I've written down the x squared values. 0, 1, 4, 9, 16, and 25. Okay, so I'm putting those in L3. And then now what we want to do is we want to take x squared, which is in L3, and multiply by its corresponding probabilities, which is in L2. So we're going to take L3 and multiply it by L2. And I'm going to put that in a new column. I'm going to put that in L5. And so I'm going to scroll up to L5. So you can see my cursor is up there at L5. And then L5 is going to be equal to L3 times L2. Okay, so L3 is right here. You have to use the second button, times L2, which is right here. Again, you have to use the second button. And then press enter, and you can see that it fills in those numbers. And let's just double check them. These are the same numbers that I have listed here. So these are the x squared times p numbers. And now we just have to add those numbers up. So again, I'm going to turn off the calculator to get rid of this table. And then I'm just going to add up these numbers. So 0.148 plus 1.308 plus 2.943 plus 2.368 plus 0.625. Okay, so those numbers add up to 7.392. That is this summation here. That's this number right here. And now we have to subtract off the mean squared. And remember, the mean was 2.5. Now, one thing you can do here to make your life easier is you don't have to type this number back in. You can use the answer button, which is this blue button here, and it just takes the previous answer. So I'm going to do that. So you have to use the second button to do this. And you can see this is going to take the previous answer, and now I'm going to subtract off from that number 2.5 squared, and your square button is right here. Okay, and so press enter, and that gives you 1.142, and then don't forget you have to take the square root of that number. Now the square root button is a blue button. It's right here, so make sure you use the second button, and you can see it shows the square root, and I'm going to take the square root of this answer, the previous answer, so I'm going to put in answer, second answer. And then I'm going to close parentheses, and it's going to take the square root of the previous answer, which is the 1.142. And now press enter, and that's the square root of that number. Okay, it's 1.06. Okay, and so that's sigma, right? That's the standard deviation for this probability distribution. Okay, let's just go back and check and see if we got the correct answers here. So the mean was 2.5, and then the standard deviation rounded to 1 decimal place. Now they want us to round it to 1 decimal, so if you go back, if you round this to 1 decimal place, it would round off to 1.1. Okay, and so that's the standard deviation of the probability distribution. Okay, so that's how you work out this problem. There are quite a bit of numbers here that you have to work with, but I think if you take advantage of the calculator, the TI-84 calculator, it does make your life a little bit easier, so you don't have to do all the tedious calculations. Okay, so I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.